Welcome to this class. Today I want to focus on procurement planning, and I'll be the one presenting, Daniel Ndigwa. So procurement plan is very critical in procurement. This is because it is a budget implementation instrument that is used to record all forecasted requirements. So remember, in an organization, they always require items. It can either be goods, works, or services. And in order for budgeting to take place, they must ensure that all the user departments have been able to produce the requirements that they want. So it plays an integral part in the budgeting process in that it allows the organization to be able to give what is called financial estimates or cost estimates. So planning, on the other side, is a very important process which is undertaken by the organization for purposes of outlining and scheduling various tasks or activities in the organization. So planning is that process now of ensuring that you are able to outline or schedule all the requirements that are needed in the organization. And this helps the organization to be able to set the various timelines and be able to achieve the set objectives that they have in that organization. Planning is the process that can be broken down into three parts. The first one is it begins with goals. And the second one, it involves breaking down the strategies into actionable activities. And lastly, it is a specific assignment that is assigned to various issues within the organization. Then the other thing that we must know is the procurement planning. This is the process of identifying and documenting all the requirements that are needed in the organization. For example, if you need particular materials in the organization, you need. So simply put, basically procurement planning is the process of deciding what to buy, when to buy, and from what source to buy. Once you answer all those questions, it will become easier for you to be able to know what exactly is needed for the organization. It also helps to specify the duration that the plan is going to take. And all this is summarized in a document called the procurement plan. So after understanding what is a procurement plan, the other thing that we must understand today is various issues that are related to procurement planning. The first one is aggregation and consolidation. And this is the process of assembling all the requirements of similar specification and attributes in the procurement plan so that the organization is able to enjoy economies of scale while buying. And it also helps to ensure that the organization is able to get what it takes in terms of the various needs that are needed in the organization. Basically, reduction of costs of procurement by getting discounts. So what are some of the considerations that you need during aggregation and consolidation? Number one is the needs of similar nature and are likely to attract potential bidders. The other thing that is very critical is the period of aggregation. How long is the aggregation going to take? Is it going to be a whole year? Is it going to be more than a year? Or is it seasonal? It's always important to understand that. The other important thing is whether the storage and distribution capacity and cost offsets the potential of economies of scale or saving through aggregation. So if you're able to save as an organization, then you can be able to use the aggregation method. The other thing is the optimum size and type of the contract to attract the great and most responsive competition. So the essence of business is to ensure that you are able to bring people on board who will be able to share or will be able to compete, and the best carries the day. The other thing that is very critical is the need to apply any applicable measures to promote participation of small enterprises and ensure that every person in the community who wishes to do so is given a chance to participate. Items will also be subjected to the same bidding requirements and conditions of the contract. And lastly, the potential to realize savings in time or transaction cost or facilitate contract administration to the procuring entity. So if you're able to realize some kind of costs on the various transactions, then you're good to go. So what are some of the advantages of aggregation? Number one, it increases your bargaining power of a procuring entity. So you'll be able to have an upper hand when it comes to bargaining with various suppliers. It may also attract the quantity discounts. Therefore, the buyer will be able to be given quantity discounts by a particular supplier or a particular order. Then we have low ordering costs. So at the end of the day, you realize you're doing the ordering wholesomely. Therefore, you'll be able to reduce your ordering cost. It also helps to elevate the buying position from the perspective of the supplier. So the buyer becomes an important customer to the supplier. So therefore, it means that it will be able to elevate both the buyer and the supplier. Consolidation and aggregation can lead to the application of more competitive procurement methods. So you as the organization will be able to use the best method of procurement that will bring benefits to the organization. So the other important thing that we are going to talk about today is lotting. And lotting refers to the revision of procurement requirements into separate contracts that will otherwise be procured in a single contract. So this is where you divide various procurement contracts into lots, depending on the various characteristics of those products. This is done basically when you want to realize the award of a separate contract that may result to the best value for money by the buying entity. So if an organization wants to get best value for money, they can decide to spread the procurement requirements into various lots. So lotting may also be as a result of an attempt to comply with the preference and reservation schemes to ensure that certain lots are reserved only for targeted groups in the organization. So when should you apply lotting in procurement? Number one, when unbundling the contract for purposes of preference and reservation. So if you are setting aside various procurements to a certain particular class of people, then you require to lot them. The other thing is when it can be justified that the award of several separate contracts will result to the best value for the buying entity. So if at the end of the day, you are going to be competitive in your procurement method, you can decide to apply lotting. Then the other important aspect is when lotting is meant to cater for small enterprises that do not qualify for competition for a complete package. So you can decide to lot basing your fact that you are going to give various enterprises who do not qualify for a particular bid. Then when the division into separate lots is likely to attract more suppliers, enabling participation of bidders who are able to bid. So basically, if your essence is to ensure that you invite different people to come on board to compete for a particular bid, then you can decide to use lotting. So what are some of the circumstances that are very critical when you are lotting is not permissible? Number one, if the purpose is to avoid establishing a procurement threshold, then you are not required to use lotting. Number two, where the award of separate contracts will create problems of compatibility, standardization, interchangeability between separate lots. So if it is going to bring confusion or compatibility issues or standardization or interchangeability, then you're not supposed to use lotting. And where the award of separate contracts would invalidate or restrict any contractor warranty or liability of already existing contract. So sometimes it becomes difficult when you're using lotting, because if the essence is to invalidate or restrict any contractor, then lotting is not the best option. And where the award of several separate contracts will increase the cost of service, maintenance, or similar requirements. So what are some of the rules of lotting? Number one, where a requirement is divided into lots or equal package with the purpose of encouraging competition, no single vendor should be awarded more than one lot, as this will defeat the purpose of division. So no given contractor should be given more than one lot. Then where the requirement is divided into lots that will result into separate contract, then the selection of the method may be determined by estimating the value of the individual lot and not the total value of the lot. So it is always important to consider all those rules when you are doing lotting. And lastly, where a requirement or requirements could be procured as a single contract is divided into lots of single equal package. Therefore, the procuring entity shall permit bidders to bid for a single lot or any combination. So the other thing that we must talk about today is the grouping. So we were talking about grouping, and I talked earlier and I said the grouping refers to the separation and putting together procurement needs into appropriate classification of goods, work, services, or consultancy services. This is where you group various items depending on their characteristic. And the essence of doing this is to ensure that when you are buying those items, you are not going to mix them. Therefore, grouping plays a very critical role. So basically, you decide you are looking for items that have similar characteristics and try to put them together so that you can buy those items. Then the other thing that is very critical is when you are talking about packaging. So packaging is also very critical in the organization. And packaging refers to putting together all the requirements in a single purchase order known as a procurement package. So packaging is where you buy all the items in a single procurement package. This also is the putting items into single procurement package where those items are purchased together as one package or as a single package. Packaging assists the procurement function in choosing the appropriate procurement method to be used among other considerations. So the most important procurement form of package may include the following: the grouping of procurement requirements within a procurement category for the purposes of acquiring them under a single contract. So if your reason is to acquire those items under a single contract, you can decide to set up a package for those items. Number two is when the division of one requirement into multiple lots where bidders can submit their bids for one, several, or all lots as may be prescribed by the tender invitation document. So if the invitation document tells you to be able to put all the requirements into various multiple lots, then you can decide to use packaging. Then grouping of procurement requirements where the need for equipment involves installation and extended to training and operation. So if you're dealing with technical items and these items must come together, then you can decide to use packaging because it will be considered as one package. In packaging the items, you may consider the following. Number one, whether there are suppliers that can provide a combination of the procurement goods. Number two, the ability of the procuring units to be able to coordinate various suppliers that may need for package to reduce the number of suppliers that procurement unit will have to coordinate. Then if there is a possibility of the local suppliers being able to fulfill the requirements of the procurement package, then you can go ahead and use the package. And whether the requirements are needed simultaneously or you have identical items that are needed, you can decide to use them as one package. And where the items are large in size or small in size, and the cost aspect is taken into consideration. Then we have profiling. Profiling refers to the analysis of all procurement package from purpose of establishing, number one, the value of the items in each procurement package and the degree of difficulties in procuring those procurement package. So when you're profiling your items, it is always important to consider the value of those items and the difficulty in procuring those items. And the figure that follows classifies or profiles various items. And the first category is talking about the bottleneck items, which are difficult to procure and relatively at lower cost. Then we have the strategic items that are difficult to procure at relatively high cost. And we have the non-critical items and the leverage items. So this is a profiling matrix that is very common in procurement. So what are some of the importance of profiling? Number one, the requirements profiling is done to examine the entity's procurement portfolio, and it exposes the supply market risks based on the identified plan procurement needs. So you're able to understand some of the risks that are associated when you're procuring certain items into the organization. It also helps in ensuring that the buying organization is able to determine when to initiate procurement process. So you'll be able to know at what point the organization is supposed to initiate the procurement process, indicating the various risks that are very critical in relation to the procurement package. It also helps in buying entity to determine the importance of supplier base and the risk of procurement package. The other thing is that it helps the organization to be able to identify bottleneck items, and these are items that their requirements may not be of high value, but very critical in the operation of a business. For example, the internet. The other thing is that it can be used to rank and prioritize items and hence plan for them effectively. So the other thing that you must understand is the role of procurement in the role of planning in the procurement process. And here we talked about the various procurement process, which are very, very critical in the organization. And one of the things that you must understand is the various contents that are needed in a procurement plan. Remember, we say that a procurement plan is a document that is very critical in the organization. And this document basically summarizes all the requirements, all the responsibilities, and everything that the organization is doing in regards to procurement of goods, works, or services. The importance of procurement plan is that it helps to list all the requirements expected to be procured over a period of time. So you'll be able to understand what is required in the organization and some of the lists that are very critical in the organization. It also helps the organization to be able to schedule the various developments in the organization. And this basically allows for better consolidation of similar requirements in the organization. The other important is that it helps in ensuring that the procuring entity is able to determine before it adds any additional staffs into the organization. It also helps to allow the monitoring of the procurement process. So you'll be able to monitor the procurement process that is very critical in the organization. And lastly, it enhances transparency and predictability of the procurement process. So procurement is very critical. And for you to be successful in procurement, you must be able to understand the process of procurement. So some of the key consideration of content of a procurement plan may include a detailed description of the breakdown of goods, works, and services. It also shows a schedule of plan delivery, implementation, and completion date. It indicates the justification for whether a procurement requirement should be procured under a single year period or multi-year arrangement. It also has an indication of some of the items that need aggregation, some of those that need packaging, profiling, and what have you. And where aggregation is justified, it also gives the optimum period that is required for aggregation. An indication of the items divided into lots, an estimate of the value also is very critical. And some of those other contents that are very critical in procurement plan. It also gives an indication of the rules that are applicable in procurement and whether the procurement function will be carried out by the procuring entity or specialized procuring unit or any other special agency. So basically it gives an highlight of what is expected at the end of the day. Thank you for listening. In case of any question, feel free and always ask. Thank you.